Today, I'm bringing you 10 players you must be stashing ahead of Week 2 fantasy football. And if you tuned into this video last week, we gave you some pretty decent stashes. We gave you Dylan Sampson. Isaac Tesla was one that was really good. So as we kind of head into this week, like I said, we saw the waiver wires with Harold Fannin, with Dylan Sampson be absolutely electric. Quentin Johnston, Hollywood Brown. So I want to make sure you're getting ahead of that so you can get those players onto your team before you have to absolutely bid up your fad or use one of your high priority waiver wire spots heading into next week. Okay, player number 1 that I would be stashing, and this guy probably isn't available because he was pretty heavily added last week, but if for some reason Bhayshul Tuten is still out there on your waiver wire, 100% be going to add Bhayshul Tuten, because what we saw the Jacksonville Jaguars do is they, of course, trade away Tank Bigsby, and with them trading away Tank Bigsby, the thing that we're going to see with Bhayshul Tuten is that he is going to slide into that RB2 role. Now, if we take a look at his overall stats in this week 1 game, only had a 6% snap share, had 3 attempts for 11 yards for 3.67 yards per carry. Now, we saw Travis Etienne get a majority of this work for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you also saw LaQuint Allen as well come in and have a pretty predominant role. When it comes to LaQuint Allen, had 9 total snaps compared to Bhayshul Tuten only having 4. But I would say that Bhayshul Tuten for me is the running back that I want to own behind Travis Etienne, just because of the not only the draft capital of him being a 4th round pick, but kind of what James Gladstone, the GM, said about Bhayshul Tuten from the time they drafted him all the way up to this time. I'm really excited for Bhayshul Tuten. I think he is the quote unquote who could be the next Bucky in a Liam Cohen offense. That would be Bhayshul Tuten. So if for some reason good old Bhayshul is out there, go try to add him, because right now on Sleeper, he is only rostered in 43% of leagues. So I understand that maybe some of you guys play in a deeper league than others, but Bhayshul Tuten hits that threshold of under 50% rostered that I like to talk about in these stash videos. So definitely go add some Bhayshul Tuten. My second player that I'm continuing to stash on the end of my bench heading into week 2 fantasy football, it's going to be Ollie Gordon, running back for the Miami Dolphins. And the Miami Dolphins got absolutely train wrecked by the Indianapolis Colts in week 1. And based on that, we saw pretty much Devon Achane have the most snaps. They were running, especially in the second half, a ton of just empty. And we're looking at Ollie Gordon only having 12 total snaps compared to Devon had 34. Jeff Wilson had 1, but the clear takeaway from week 1 is that Ollie Gordon is the clear 2. And we have seen in this Mike McDaniel offense where Devon has clearly been an absolutely electric fantasy football player, but it hasn't been a few years ago where we saw Raheem Mostert have some fantasy football value as that RB2. And so I do think Ollie Gordon is somebody that I want to have on my bench. I understand a little bit of the worry that, Caleb, if this offense is absolute cheeks, we could be a little bit worried that Ollie Gordon never gets on the field or never really puts up any fantasy football value. But when we're looking at him only being 49% rostered, he's in that same conversation for me as Bhayshul Tuten. I think the Dolphins, and just historically based on Mike McDaniel, I think they do figure out a way to at least put up points. I'm not saying that they're going to win more games, but I think if they're just in a little bit better game scripts week in and week out, we could be looking at Ollie Gordon being a great level stash. Like I said, I prefer Bhayshul Tuten over Ollie Gordon, but definitely if Ollie Gordon is out there, 100% be adding Ollie Gordon to your bench. My next player you must be stashing in week 2 fantasy football, it is going to be DJ Giddens for the Indianapolis Colts. And if you would have tuned in this offseason on the DLF Fantasy Football channel, when we were doing our prospect profiles, DJ Giddens was somebody that I had as a top 10 dynasty rookie level prospect. Now, did he get drafted that way? Did I have him there after the draft capital? No, but the talent of DJ Giddens is 100% there out of Kansas State. And so we're looking at him in week 1 getting 18 snaps, ran 1 route, but he did have 12 carries. Now, of course, predominantly got in because they absolutely, like I said before talking about Ollie Gordon, the Dolphins got absolutely steamrolled. And so do I believe that DJ Giddens is going to be getting 12 carries weekly? No, but we have seen this offense really like to depend on the run. And Jonathan Taylor, as much as I love myself some Jonathan Taylor, has not been the most consistent man when it comes to overall health. I mean, let's just take a look at 2024. He played in 14 games, 10 games in 2023, 11 games in 2022. His last fully healthy season was in 2021 where he played in 17 games. So if I'm looking at DJ Giddens and I'm trying to can I get somebody that could potentially give me between 2 to 4 weeks of production value, I would be looking at a guy like DJ Giddens. especially if a Bhayshul Tuten or Ollie Gordon, where I understand DJ Giddens might not have that weekly level floor that maybe those guys have just because they're the clear number twos, and they'll probably get some more work than DJ Giddens will. But I just want to get in on DJ Giddens right now because, like we said, if something were to happen to Jonathan Taylor and this offense would continue to hum with Daniel Jones, Mr. Danny Dimes turning back into, I don't even know if there's like a prime Danny Dimes. This is like him actually being prime Danny Dimes. Then I want to be 100% taking a shot on good old DJ Giddens here as my third mustache player heading into week 2 fantasy football. My fourth player you must be stashing, it is going to be Woody Marks for the Houston Texans. And yes, Woody Marks was the clear RB4 in week 1 fantasy football. But as we have seen, sometimes these depth charts can really change, especially with rookies, especially with rookie level running backs. And Woody Marks continues to be the best pass catcher, in my humble opinion, in that Houston Texans backfield. And when we look at how this Houston Texans team struggled to move the ball, especially with their inefficient offensive line, especially even though Nick Chubb had most of the snaps, where we're looking at Nick Chubb had 32 snaps for 13 carries, Woody Marks only had 7. And we saw, of course, Dameon Pierce and Dare Ungumbale have more than Woody Marks. I just want to be taking a shot on Woody Marks because I think he's more talented than the two guys in front of him right now. Now, this might take some time. This could be a move for week 4, week 5, week 6. And maybe you're like, Caleb, I don't have that much time to wait. And that's fair. That's fair. So hopefully you can add one of the stashes I mentioned before. But Woody Marks, coming out of the University of USC, really great pass catching back. I think he's everything that we'd want. The Houston Texans, we've seen whoever this has been, like last year with Joe Mixon. We didn't see it with Nick Chubb in week 1, but I just think whoever it is can have a ton of PPR fantasy football value. And so definitely want to be stashing Woody Marks, especially considering the fact that he's only 16% roster, but definitely would stash these other running backs that I mentioned ahead of Woody. But Woody is somebody that I'm just continuing to be super, super high on. Now, my 5th overall stash that you must be stashing for fantasy football, it is going to be Jaden Blue from the Dallas Cowboys. And you're going to say to me, Caleb, are you just highlighting all these rookie level running backs? And I'm going to say yes, because Jaden Blue was inactive in week 1, was like a healthy scratch. And honestly, it's looking like he's probably going to be inactive in week 2. So this is one of the more stashes where maybe you just keep him on the back of your mind, because if he doesn't play, I just continue to feel like we saw Miles Sanders. There was a little bit of explosion, but we saw Javonte Williams be the main bell cow. And I believe that Jaden Blue, by midpoint of the season, could be a lot more electric than Miles Sanders in that RB2 role for the Dallas Cowboys, and especially considering the fact that how much the Dallas Cowboys are going to be moving up and down the field. I know CeeDee Lamb had himself some massive drops in week 1, but if we're looking at Jaden Blue, I just want to take a shot on him out of the University of Texas. Really great pass catching back, especially with a quarterback like Dak Prescott, who is not afraid to check the ball down because he's not out here rushing around being a economical quarterback like he used to be in the early part of his career. I do want to be taking a shot on Jaden Blue as a whole, as another stash. Now, moving on to some wide receivers, we are going to be stashing Elic Ayomanor from the Tennessee Titans. And like I said, man, I struggled to learn how to pronounce Devon Achane's name. I'm over here struggling to pronounce good old Elic. But dude put up pretty good results in week 1, even though we put up 3.3 fantasy points. 7 targets, 2 receptions for 13 yards. He was targeted early. He was targeted often by Mr. Cam Ward. And this whole Titans offense did not look like the best, but let's also put into perspective, they were going against the Denver Broncos, who might have the best defense in football, fantasy football, actual NFL football. So considering the fact that he was number 2 in snaps with 45, he had 7 total targets. So he was the number 2 target earner on a team with Tennessee Titans team that I think is going to be down a lot. They're not going to be that good, so they're going to have to throw the ball around the whole entire yard. Give me, I enjoy some Calvin Ridley, but give me Elic as the number 2. Tyler Lockett's getting up there in age, so I think Elic is probably the most explosive wide receiver they have, even though he didn't have exceptional draft capital coming out of the University of Stanford this year. I still want to be giving him a shot, especially with Cam Ward continuing to progress, learn the NFL game. It's probably going to be a little bit kind of rough here over the next few weeks for this overall Titans offense. But I think as we kind of get into that week 4, week 5 territory, Cam Ward gets his legs underneath him a little bit more. That Elic definitely would be a great stash, especially if you need some wide receiver help on your team. But like if you're playing in one of these leagues where you have like 1 flex and like 3 bench spots, of course you're not stashing Elic at this point. Definitely try to grab one of those running backs earlier on in the video. But if you play in a deeper league like 12, 14, 16 team league, this would be a guy that I would have my eyes on. Next guy you should be stashing is going to be Dante Thornton. And Dante Thornton was kind of everybody's prime stash candidate last week, and then came out in week 1 and only put up 6.5 fantasy points in full PPR, because we saw, of course, Amari Cooper retire, reopening the door for Dante Thornton, this 22-year-old, 6'5", 205, super fast wide receiver out of the University of Tennessee to come in. He got 4 targets, 2 receptions for 45 yards. Now, what we saw out of this offense for the Raiders was just a lot more passing attempts than I was actually thinking for a Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly offense. But we saw overall targets. Jacoby Myers got 10, Trey Tucker got 3, Dante Thornton got 4, Jack Bech got 1. We saw Michael Mayer get 4, and we saw Brock Bowers get 8. They really passed the ball around a lot more than I was thinking. I think Brock Bowers, his snap shares are going to continue to go up. The fact that he only had 8 targets and Jacoby Myers had 10, absolutely ridiculous. So if we're looking at Dante Thornton, I want Dante Thornton just to continue to progress. I think he'll eventually overtake Trey Tucker as the clear number 2 wide receiver, probably number 3 in targets, because I assume Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers will still lead the team in targets. But that is something that will be valuable enough, because, like I said, this Raiders team is going to be playing from behind a ton. And so take a shot on him. He's a 35% roster over on Sleeper. If you need wide receiver help, I do prefer Elic, who I mentioned before Dante Thornton, just because I think there's a little bit more clear production path for him, compared to, as much as I don't love like Jacoby Myers as the clear 1, I do think Jacoby Myers has proven over his career to be a super high, reliable, high-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy football. And so go get some Dante Thornton. I think he is a really good stash. Now, my next stash, it is going to be Malik Washington for the Miami Dolphins. And Mr. Malik is only 5% roster. So this is probably something for a deeper league, a league where you might be really hurting for wide receivers. But the reason I think he's an interesting stash is because there's all these reports coming out about Tyreek Hill trade rumors. And I know that it came out, they're not close to a deal for Tyreek Hill. But sometimes that's just how they do it in negotiations. They leak this stuff to the press, and then all of a sudden, boom, Tyreek Hill's going to be on the Chiefs. Boom, Tyreek Hill's going to be on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then Malik Washington's going to step into that wide receiver 2 role for the Dolphins. And I think when you're looking at him clearly being this like clear wide receiver 3, if Tyreek Hill were to get changed, I mean, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine would probably get the bump up to being that clear X wide receiver on the outside. I just want to be taking a shot on him. 58% snap share, 5 targets, 2 receptions. Like I said, he also has a little bit of return game, in his repertoire. So if for some reason you do get extra points for the return game, then 100% Malik Washington could be someone that you're definitely looking to add. And like I said, when we kind of get to this level of stashes, you don't necessarily have to be adding these players onto your team. I like to talk about stashes and just kind of put in perspective as I'm making this video of like, hey, if something were to happen, can I be ahead of the curve? Because like I said, if we can be ahead of the curve, if we can beat our teammates to the waiver wire in our fantasy football leagues, boom, we're going to get a ton of value and accrue that easier and quicker than having to kind of compete on that like Tuesday or Wednesday waiver wire run. Now, if anybody tuned into that Bills Baltimore Ravens game, you saw an absolutely electric game. But the thing that was intriguing to me was Mr. Josh Palmer got 5 catches in this win. Had a 62% snap share, 9 targets, 5 receptions for 61 yards, puts up 11.1 fantasy football points, and it was glorious. It was glorious for the Buffalo Bills. Now, Keon Coleman was the true winner, where he got 11 targets, looked like the clear alpha. Khalil Shakir had the second most snaps, but Joshua Palmer actually out-targeted Khalil Shakir, which I don't want to say is like surprising, but it was definitely interesting. But we saw still saw some snaps there for Elijah Moore. Of course, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid got theirs. But really for me, it was Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and Josh Palmer holding down the receiving game. So not that I'm saying I like some Keon Coleman. I think a lot of people saw that kind of second-year breakout is starting to happen. But Josh Palmer over his career has been very, very consistent, specifically when it comes to like playing for Chargers over the last 4 seasons. It's nothing that's been crazy. But even like if we go back to 2022, where he had 107 targets for 72 receptions, 769 yards, like he was fine. Like he is definitely someone that could be that, high-end wide receiver 4, low-end wide receiver 3, if possible. And so I want to be taking a shot on Joshua Palmer. Like I said, this is for maybe someone in a little bit more deeper league. Definitely target some Josh Palmer. My last and final stash, it is going to be Wad'Dale Robinson for the New York Giants, who is currently rostered in 25% of leagues. And Wad'Dale Robinson put up 11.5 fantasy points, 76% snap share, 8 targets, 6 receptions for 55 yards. This dude has always been a high-level target earner. If you look at 2024, he had 140 targets. And 140 targets are earned, they're not given. Now, the part of this whole equation is who's the quarterback, because Russell Wilson didn't look great in week 1. When are they going to move to Jackson Dart? Is that going to happen sooner rather than later? I would assume so. And then once that happens, is Jackson Dart going to be the second coming of Patrick Mahomes? Is he going to be an absolutely electric, young rookie, or is he going to be a rookie that struggles? And I think if you kind of base on how we should be judging it from a fantasy football perspective, we can't assume he's going to take off and be an absolutely electric player. So we almost have to assume he's going to struggle a little bit. I still think he's probably going to still get the amount of targets, because that's Malik Neighbors and Wad'Dale Robinson. That's kind of been their calling card last year, was the fact that they were just getting so much insane target volume because the Giants were down. I want Wad'Dale Robinson to continue to get this target volume. And I think maybe you could argue that there's a little bit more path for production for a Wad'Dale Robinson over a Josh Palmer, a Malik Washington, a Deontay Thornton here. But you kind of decide on these wide receivers, who you prefer to stash. Like I said, he's 25% rostered, so you definitely want to be taking a shot on him, especially if you need some help at the wide receiver position. I know for a lot of my teams, some of those teams that I had an Nico Collins or an AJ Brown, no, I'm not dropping those guys for Wad'Dale Robinson. Hear me out. But what I am doing is I'm making sure that I do have options on my bench. So definitely check out these stashes. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. We are on the way to 2,000 subscribers here on the 4for4 Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Absolutely appreciate you guys. Leave us any start sit questions down below, and we will happily get to those here in a bit. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Good luck in week 2 fantasy football.